I'm Grant from Blackmagic Design, and today we've got some updates on cameras. It has similar controls, so it's very familiar to use, because it's a member of the Pocket Cinema camera family.
There is a growing storm within the camera community. What started just as a light wind at the beginning of this year has now quickly turned into a raging tornado of opinions, speculation, and attraction. From the company that gave you B-RAW, 6K Pro, the Ursa G2, and freaking 12K, I mean, what more could people want from the wizard from down under? Obviously, the object I speak of is the infamous box-style cinema camera. And while the argument for this kind of movement always seems to be just that it's a small vocal part of a community that's talking about it, this one seems to be a pretty deep-seated idea and desire within the community itself, with people in various industries asking for it. In fact, recent polls we've run have shown that not only do people want it over other potential camera releases, they think Blackmagic will be the first ones to release it this year. And with all this speculation and desire from people over a red Komodo style camera, we have to ask the logical question of why do they want this? And what is it about this design that would benefit filmmakers of all types? And is it actually beneficial? Let's get into this.
It's a picture perfect kind of world with you, world with you. It's a picture perfect kind of world with you.
There are several reasons you could look at here that it would be beneficial as far as form factor, ease of use with gimbals, rigging, optics, and a lot more. And I asked users that very question in a poll and got a whole host of answers. In this poll, over 50% of voters wanted this box design to make rigging easier. So that's where we're gonna start first, is with rigging out your camera. So, I mean, there's nothing worse than having a camera that is not really compatible or comparable with anything else out there on the market. And that's the issue many have with the Pocket Cinema camera line. While it has similarities to DSLR cameras, it's still much larger and kind of an odd design overall. And while it's totally workable, and I've talked about it in other videos, you do run into some issues upon release, like with the 6K Pro, when no one could get a cage system for what seemed like months after its release. Having a more standardized form would help to be able to use products already out there on the market without having to wait on Small Rig and Tilta to come out with a new cage for the cameras. Now, with that being said, some of the compatibility will be determined on how Blackmagic decides to build a box-styled camera. Too big or too small barely to work with existing third-party gear. But it would be beneficial to users if it was a bit more modular in nature, being really designed to be adapted to use for various rigging in particular. And that's how we get into the form factor, which was next in the poll at 31%.
Not a period, I'm a trying to see watch like the Dalai Lama.
Now, form factor and rigging really do go kind of hand in hand, but I wanted to separate them because the form factor is also slightly different than just rigging. There are several use cases where something in this specific form could be good for drone work, and especially FPV drone work. I've seen some FPV filmmakers actually use the Pocket 4K on top of a drone with a tiny Laowa lens, and also a guy who literally deconstructed the Pocket 4K to put on an FPV drone. That's a little different. But usually, they use it with like a little tiny Laowa lens, and overall, it does seem a bit sketchy, but they do get some good results from it. But these cameras just were not designed to be used for this kind of purpose. And that feels kind of like what Blackmagic originally designed those micro cinema cameras to be used for. And with the increase in drone usage in commercials, TV, movies, and more, it does seem like it would be a big deal, especially if it costs less to use than a red Komodo. And another great use for the form factor would be the ease of balancing the camera, distributing weight much better for gimbals, Steadicams, and more. Now, also some of that for balancing, we'll get into some of the cons of it because there are a couple different issues there. We can talk about that here in a second.
I know that you think it's so important to convince everyone else that you're not boring, but it's
Coming in last was optics at 8% that people felt that they wanted to have this form factor for. And this is something that I feel will only affect a certain industry group within filmmaking, mostly those who get jobs to film that have specific requirements for cameras or whose clients expect the cameras to look a certain way and can be skeptical when they pull out a Pocket Cinema camera. Having more, I guess you could say, a Hollywood-looking camera, or at least what the perception of some people would be of what a Hollywood camera would look like. can come in handy for some users. Now, while there are great pros to this specific camera shape, there are a couple of cons to it, obviously. Depending on the design, you will probably not be able to use this right out of the box, and this affects more run and gun filmmakers. You will have to rig this style camera to be able to hold it while filming, and that's the benefit of the pocket cinema camera design, is that while it can be unwieldy for certain applications, you don't necessarily have to rig it up to use it. With a box style cinema camera, you will absolutely need to rig everything up for it to be functional in certain situations. So while it does make sense for certain functions to use a box style cinema camera, it does have drawbacks as far as rigging it out. Now, another issue comes down to, does it have a screen on it? Even if it comes with a screen, it may not be large enough for use in the field or in direct sunlight, meaning you might also have to purchase and utilize an external monitor, going back to extra rigging. And these first two factors do make it questionable for use in remote locations where you do have to keep weight down to a minimum, though you could get around this potentially with a well-designed adventure filmmaker's kit. Also, the box shape would be kind of hard to throw in a backpack for those of you who like to film in nature or in travel documentary type stuff. And again, some of these issues are resolvable. But even though the pocket camera design is somewhat odd, it does offer, even with terrible battery life, a little bit more ease of use if you're doing a lot of run and gun work. And even then I would question whether or not to get the Ursa instead, to be honest, which I know some people won't like. But this leaves us with the question of, should we expect to see this from Blackmagic this year, or in the near future at least? I feel like it's inevitable in some ways that it's going to happen. But Blackmagic design always seems to surprise us all with just everything they release. So maybe the wizard himself is cooking something up there that we're not expecting. But I would be surprised to not see the style cinema camera within the next year, and to be honest, before NAB. And some of that's also due to the potential discontinuation of the micro cinema and 4K studio camera here recently. And you should watch that to find out why. Hear more in this video.